Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. Pan Gong So and a bunch of great shamans and shaman kings had made their way to the entrance of the abyss. The several hundred divine arts practitioners of barbarian DI Empire were left with less than 100 people. All the others had died in this strange and unpredictable forest of Ghost Valley. Even if there had been countless expeditions of Roland's Golden Palace's great shamans who had explored this place in the past, the large-scaled exploration this time still resulted in great casualties. To Pan Gong So, it didn't matter how many people had died as long as he wasn't one of them. The lives of these soldiers, great shamans, and even shaman kings were disposable. The purpose of bringing all these people was to have them protect him, to use their corpses to pave out a path to the center of Ghost Valley. As an old monster that had lived for 10,000 years, he could overlook the lives of anyone. The only one he treasured was himself. I'm finally here. Pan Gong So stood at the side of the abyss and looked down with infatuation. Ghost Valley had only entered his sight 16 years ago. The incident of a flying ship from outer space crashing into Ghost Valley had led to the attention of three powers. Roland's Golden Palace, Heavenly Devil Cult, and Great Thunderclap Monastery had all set their sights on this place. However, Heavenly Devil Cult had no cult master at the time, and Great Thunderclap Monastery knew some secrets, so neither of them came to explore the place. At that time, Pan Gong So was already approaching old age, and because he valued his life, he didn't come personally. Instead, he hid in Roland's Golden Palace to wait for his sacred child of reincarnation. However, the broken sword that one shaman king brought back from Ghost Valley had made him realize that the ship from outer space was extraordinary. Once he succeeded in reincarnating, he made his way here. As if to make things easier for him, Qin Mu was preparing to mobilize his army on Eternal Peace Empire, and Pan Gong So could borrow the military power of Qin Mu to enter the place. Qin Mu, do you guys feel it? Pan Gong So asked in a low voice. This place is filled with the power of souls that have shattered souls and given birth to these weird life forms. This is the best sacred ground for us great shamans to cultivate. Beside him, the great shamans and shaman kings felt a throbbing from their souls. The atmosphere here made their souls, spirits, and primordial spirits dance in jubilation. This place was filled with the power of souls and spirits. The abundant spirit energy and soul energy here surpassed what they could find in Roland's Golden Palace. Along their way, they had met the queer life forms of Ghost Valley, which were like a nightmare to the soldiers of barbarian DI Empire. However, to these great shamans, they were like moving supplement pills. Of course, these kind of pills were slightly dangerous. Using the souls and spirits of other life forms was the original cultivation method of the great shamans. Shaman King Qin Mu breathed in the air coming from the abyss greedily. The spirit energy there was even stronger, and he exclaimed, if our Roland's Golden Palace gained a footing here, we'd be able to strengthen the abilities of our great shamans twice as fast. The spirit energy and soul energy here even helps to improve the primordial spirit. It went without saying that Roland's Golden Palace, which was strong in souls and spirits, was strong in primordial spirits as well. Their attainments in souls, spirits, and primordial spirit were very profound. Other sacred grounds and even Great Thunderclap Monastery were inferior them in regard of these. It was only that their method of cultivation was strange, using souls and spirits of living beings to cultivate, that they were always criticized. If they could take over this place, Roland's Golden Palace would definitely develop to a stage that had never been imagined by relying on the spirit and soul energy of this place. The rise of the prairie's sacred ground would definitely reach the throne of the Middle Plains, suppressing all the sacred grounds in Middle-earth. What's important isn't this, it's that flying ship from outer space. Pan Gong So's gaze was slightly infatuated when he said softly, what is attracting me is not how to borrow the spirit and soul energy to cultivate, but how to break through, to surpass the boundaries of humans and become a god. This ship should have what I want. It had come from outer space. He didn't say more and jumped down. The other great shamans, shaman kings, and the remaining soldiers of barbarian DI Empire went after with him, guarding his surroundings. Pan Gong So was an existence that had lived for 10,000 years and knew a lot of secrets. Other sacred grounds like Great Thunderclap Monastery and Tao Sect relied on the histories recorded in the books in the sacred grounds, which might be biased, but he relied on his own memory. The things he had experienced were simply too many. Even though his lifespan didn't surpass the length of Great Thunderclap Monastery or Tao Sect's existence, he had once been part of the higher-ups of those two sacred grounds. He had even been to Little Jade Capital and seen the secrets recorded there. This ship should have come from that mysterious place, which might be the only place in the world where people can still become gods. No matter what, I've got to get the ship and go there, he thought to himself. In mid-air, they met attacks from all kinds of strange and weird life forms from the abyss. Numerous soldiers, great shamans, and shaman kings made their moves and exerted all their power to protect Pangong Tso. After losing over a dozen men, they reached the bottom of the abyss. On the treasure ship, Qin Mu looked at the devil Qi that was withdrawing and felt hesitant. There was definitely a terrifying entity in the devil Qi. He didn't know if it was a Yudu life form, but its abilities were extremely strong, stronger than those of the two white bats. But with just a single phrase of Yudu language, this entity had retreated. It made things slightly suspicious. After the devil Qi withdrew, the miserable screams lingering around also vanished. The surroundings became incomparably quiet, and the strange life forms pouring out from Yudu world vanished. Because of the silence, things seemed even stranger. The entity that exhausted the two eminent monks to death must be on this ship. Qin Mu frowned. The silence on the ship was terrifying. Fatty Dragon, Yuchen, Yuchio, let's go in and take a look. If we meet with any danger, we'll immediately leave. Qin Mu said solemnly and took a step forward. Fu Yuchen and Fu Yuchio immediately came in front of him while flapping their wings. The two white bats flew silently with their heads lower than their feet. The dragon Chiline followed after the group, guarding the back. They moved forward from the left of the treasured ship and encountered the beehive seals when they reached the center. The beehive seals here were still very densely packed together, allowing little devil Qi to leak through the cracks. Suddenly, the structure beside them creaked, and a door opened up. A faint light came from inside. The two white bats hurriedly dodged aside and hung between the two sides of the door, stretching their heads toward the room to take a look. The place was part of the building on the deck. The room was 20 yards long and wide, decorated with jade tables and screens. The candlesticks on the jade table were alight, and there was a censer in the mouth of the bronze crane. Smoke was rising from it in spirals. There was nobody else in the room, but from the looks of the candlesticks and censer, someone seemed to have been there moments ago. This place is safe, Fu Yuchen said. Qin Mu opened his green heaven's eyes to look in and saw no problem. He then did another sweep with Cinnabar heaven's eyes, but could still see nothing wrong. They walked into the room and looked around. Fu Yuchio said, "Weird, this door has never opened before, but it opened today." Never opened before. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. The two white bats nodded in unison. The doors on this ship couldn't be opened even with all our strength, it's very weird. There were not many things in this room besides screen embroidered with green mountains and blue waters. There was a small boat in the heart of the river and an elder sitting on the bow of the boat, fishing. One of the white bats came to the front of the jade table, wanting to pick up a candlestick, yet he couldn't lift it, so he could only drop the thought. Qin Mu took a look around this place. He faintly sensed someone looking at them, yet he couldn't find the source of the gaze. It pushed him to a state of alertness. His gaze went around his surroundings, but the feeling of being watched remained. His vital chi poured out and transformed into a mirror that reflected the surroundings. At that moment, he saw the fishing old man in the painting secretly turn his head back to examine their group. Qin Mu turned and pounced at the screen. The old man lost his head out from fear and immediately threw down the fishing rod while leaping away himself. He was extremely agile, running from this screen to the wall before disappearing through a door. Qin Mu immediately gave chase and opened the door to rush out, but it slammed closed. Astonished, Qin Mu retreated backward, and carefree sword that was on his back rose into the sky, transforming into wave sword form to protect his body. At the same time, he stretched his hand out to push the door behind him while saying in a solemn voice, "Fu brothers, fatty dragon, come quickly." Fu brothers. Qin Mu turned his head back and was stunned. This room wasn't the one he'd entered before. Instead, it was some woman's embroidery room. Meanwhile, the room that he had come from had vanished without a trace. The two white bats and the dragon Qilin hurriedly pushed open the door, but they were met with emptiness, Qin Mu having vanished into thin air. Their expressions changed drastically, and they hurriedly pushed open the doors to the other rooms, but they still couldn't find any traces of Qin Mu. That's not right. The dragon Qilin had pushed open the door behind him and stretched his head out to look. This is not the room that we come from. There's something strange with the rooms in this ship. The two white bats closed the door which they had opened and saw that the room had changed into another one when they opened it again. They did this a few more times, and each time they closed and opened the door, the room would be different. We're goners. Fu Yuchen had an ashen expression and his voice quivered. If we don't find him, our white bat god race will go extinct once the toxicity flares up. Don't panic, the dragon Qilin said. There definitely has to be a limit to the rooms here. There can't be infinite rooms. As long as we find the previous room, we will be able to find a pattern. That's right, how are your algebra attainments? Qin Mu's heart leaped, and he immediately walked into the embroidery room. He closed the door behind him while thinking, I came through the same door, so why did it become another room after closing and opening the door? There's definitely some method used to overlap space. Even though this ship is huge, there can't be infinite rooms in this building, there's definitely a limit. As long as the number of rooms has a limit, we'll be able to find a pattern. He calmed himself and examined his surroundings. This embroidery room had wall lamps lighted, and on the walls hung a few embroideries. Below them was a work table with a handkerchief of dragons playing with phoenixes on one side. The writing table was farther away. It held a brush, ink, papers, and inkstone, while a mat was situated below to sit. The ink on the paper had yet to dry. The moist dew moving to and fro under the tender yellow wind. The night show of the human world is not inadvertent, the refined character and light makeup that's as beautiful as the sky. Who could match it? After this, the words were abruptly cut off. Something urgent must have happened, because of which the person couldn't continue to write. Qin Mu examined the handwriting and praised, "This technique is not inferior to mine, it's a little graceful." At this moment, the fishing elder suddenly entered the writings in front of him and blinked at him. Qin Mu sneered and raised the brush to smear him when that elder jumped onto the table. He then ran onto the wall and escaped through another door. Qin Mu immediately chased after him with the brush in hand. The elder in the painting vanished after going into the next room, and Qin Mu didn't know where he had hidden himself this time. Qin Mu entered the room and looked around. It was a study, and the books there were very ancient. He pulled one out and wanted to open it, but he couldn't do it no matter how hard he tried. Suddenly, the elder in the painting jumped out from the book and entered another book. Qin Mu hurriedly pulled out that book, and this time he could open it. He flipped through it and saw that it was a family register. First generation, founding Emperor Qin, his name Yi, common lord of the world. Qin Mu was stunned, founding emperor from sword of founding emperor Sea of Blood? The surname of this founding emperor is also Qin, the same as mine. The family register was very thick, having recorded the life and marriage of every person with the surname Qin with a few words. Qin Mu flipped through the book to find the old man in the painting. When he reached the last page, there was only a sentence there. 107th generation, son of Hanjin, Fengqing. After it, the family register was cut off. Pan Gongso and the rest finally reached the treasured ship. Along the way, 20-30 more people had lost their lives due to the strange attacks from the life forms of Ghost Valley. Your Highness, the cultivation of these two monks isn't weak, they are nearly at the realm of Rulai. Shaman King Mu saw the two old monks sitting on the two cliffs and his eyes lit up. Their corporeal bodies can be used to refine quite a decent treasure. I'll fetch them over. Pan Gongso didn't express his opinion, so Shaman King Mu immediately led his men up to the shrine on the cliff, toward the corporeal bodies of the two old monks. Even though the old monks were already dead, they still gave off Buddha rays. With the vibration of the Buddha voice, they defended against the devil chi that was pouring inside. The moment the corporeal bodies of the two old monks were taken away, the devil chi behind the beehive seals instantly trembled violently, causing the seals to waver from the endless bombardment. The devil chi poured out from the beehive seals all of a sudden, and the impact caused more cracks to appear on the seals. The old ones in the meantime became much larger. An indistinct dull sound came from the back of the seals, and the devil chi suddenly withdrew back behind the seals, and the terrifying impact quietened down. The silence was out of the ordinary. I'm finally here, next to the ship that carries my hopes to become a god. Pan Gong So looked at the ship from outer space, and the calm heart of his was slightly excited. With lotuses blooming under his feet, he rose up into the air. Everyone came onto the ship and looked around. Suddenly, a great shaman discovered an open door and immediately reported it. Pan Gong So brought everyone into the room while a few soldiers remained to scout out the way. When they returned to enter the room, the door suddenly closed before them, and when those soldiers opened it again, they couldn't find Pan Gong So and the rest. The people around Pan Gong So tried to go out to scout and gradually lessened in number. Even if Pan Gong So didn't care about their lives, he couldn't help panicking at this moment. Don't walk away. Pan Gong So had a grim expression as he examined the doors in details and sneered. Integration spell, space integration, layer interlocking layer. I once saw records of this kind of spell in Little Jade Capital. It's a spell from the period of founding emperor. Shaman King Gongmu had not lost his way and said in glee when he heard Pan Gong So's words, "Your Highness definitely knows the method to solve it." Pan Gong So shook his head. Little Jade Capital had no records of the method to solve it. However, a spell of integration is a kind of spell of space and algebra. My attainments in the path of algebra are very high, to the point that even Tao Master might not even be stronger than me. Calculating the method to solve this isn't difficult for me. Let us go. I want to see if the spell of integration will be able to block me or not. In the study room of the treasured ship, Qin Mu closed the family register. The last person of founding emperor's bloodline is called Qin Fengqing. Could the owner of this ship be this Qin Fengqing? Founding emperor's Qin family goes back to the dim and distant past. It's a family that's been influential for generations. The owner of this ship, Qin Fengqing, had the surname Qin, so did he have a blood relation with me? Qin Mu was about to put the family register back on the bookshelf when a strange force made him stop and stuff this family register into his Daotai sack. Just as he placed the family register, he saw that old man from the painting popping out and running onto the table, peering on the papers that were there. Qin Mu was about to capture the weird person from the painting when a figure suddenly flashed in front of his eyes. A young man appeared in front of the table and walked toward him. It was too late for Qin Mu to avoid him, but then the young man passed through his body. He was an apparition. The man had an extraordinary bearing, and his appearance gave Qin Mu a familiar amiable feeling when he passed through him. Qin Mu was astonished and turned around in a hurry. He saw the young man in white walking unhurriedly until he stopped before a wall and made the motion of opening a door. Then he vanished. Qin Mu immediately went forward and indeed saw a door. He opened it and walked through, and saw the man in white again. The place they were in was a hall in the building that suddenly filled with people walking to and fro. There were countless bodies moving about, and Qin Mu had no idea where they had come from out of nowhere. He was caught off guard, and numerous people passed through his body. They all looked very busy, so something must have happened. Among them, there were some who couldn't stabilize themselves and were falling left and right. It seemed like the ship had suffered an impact that was extremely violent and caused many of the people in the hall to fly around. There were some who got heavily injured and vomited blood. The man in white raised his hands, and all of the people were suspended in the air before gradually landing on the ground. Even though the ship was still trembling violently, everyone stood steadily where they were. A woman with a graceful and elegant bearing quickly walked toward the man in white, but Qin Mu couldn't hear what the two were talking about. The young man seemed to be consoling the woman before walking out, though. Qin Mu's gaze landed on the body of the woman, and confusion took root in his heart. He felt an indescribable familiarity with her, like she was someone close and dear. He hesitated for a moment, but in the end, chose to follow the man in white. The man walked through the long corridor, passing through doors after doors. Later, he waved his hand and a sword flew over, landing on his back. Qin Mu followed him step for step. Slightly stunned at the last action, he called his carefree sword. It gently trembled as Qin Mu saw it seemed to be the same sword as the one before him. That man in white walked to the bow of the ship and raised his head toward the sky to say something. Suddenly, the sky shook violently, and an incomparably huge snake appeared with its mouth wide open. The snake seemed to be extremely far from them, but it was very huge. In the black sky, only its head and neck could be seen while the rest of its body was hidden in the darkness. On the head of the huge snake stood terrifying existences that didn't look like humans. They looked like the god statues in the temples of great ruins but were the actual living gods. They were currently attacking the ship, and each strike felt like the destruction of a world. Qin Mu was attracted by the sword skills of the man in white since they didn't seem like they were from the mortal world. They had a wonderful charm. This kind of charm gave Qin Mu a feeling of the Tao that village chief and Tao master had mentioned before. What was different though was that village chief said that sword skills were close to Tao while Tao master said that mathematical reasonings were to Tao. The sword skills of the man in white had a different path from that of village chief PR Tao master. There was a different kind of sword path in it, but Qin Mu couldn't see what it was exactly. His judgment was still not at that kind of level yet. He was obsessed with watching it, though. What he had learned in the past were all techniques, and he'd learned them to the extreme so his sword skills could be praised to be powerful. When village chief had made him take over as the human emperor and polished his sword skills in the village, he had entered the stage of skill, the beginning of founding sword skills. After that, he had been under the guidance of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and his attainments on the stage of skill grew, becoming more and more profound. At his stage of skill, he could be known as a Grandmaster. Above skill, there was still the level of path. It was the level of village chief that not even Tao Master had reached. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was also a step away from it. Now that Qin Mu was looking at the sword skills of the man in white from the height of skill, he could see the exquisiteness of the sword skills. As for the realm of the path, even though he couldn't comprehend it, he could still grasp the marvel of it. The sword skills of the man in white were close to Tao and contained true marvel. His enemies were truly strong, they were gods, after all, but they were all still blocked by him. Suddenly, an unforeseen event happened. A terrifying power trembled the time and space. A palm collided with carefree sword, smelting it. The body of the sword melted and broke off, causing that ship to fall from the sky after the broken sword and descend into the darkness. Behind the huge palm, the snake carried the gods over to chase after the falling ship. Qin Mu was on the ship, and he could feel the tremors as it fell from the sky. The white-back god statues flashed by before the ship crashed into the ground and forced its way underground. He then felt violent tremors as the ship passed through the god underground and smashed onto the beehive seals. Qin Mu could see many casualties on the ship from the tremors. Most of the people had died in the collision. The woman walked out and gathered the people that were still alive, bringing them to leave the ship and escape to Yudu. The man in white was severely injured, but he chose to stay behind on the ship and guard the entrance to Yudu. Outside, a huge snake was stretching its head down the abyss while majestic gods stood on its forehead. The huge snake slid down and slithered through the underground, getting closer and closer to the bottom. Suddenly, the apparitions in front of Qin Mu vanished, leaving him standing alone on the deck. With a cool wind blowing against his face, his clothes flapped loudly. Turning back his head, he saw only the darkness of Yudu. He was now at the bow of the treasured ship, having entered the world of Yudu. He didn't see a huge eye appearing beneath the ship, or that it was even larger than the ship. It was watching him with interest. Qin Mu looked at Yudu world that was in the darkness. It was monstrous and multicolored over there, with life forms of all kinds of colors giving off all kinds of glow from the distance. A bunch of people had entered Yudu under the lead of the woman while the man in white had chosen to stay guard, stopping the huge snake and the gods from coming after them. Was the man in white still alive? Did he die in battle, or did he manage to stop the gods and went into Udu to look for his family? Were they from Carefree Village? Their surnames were also Qin, so were they Qin Mu, Qin? Who were those after them? Qin Mu roused his spirit. Maybe he just needed to make this ship float and he would be able to return to Carefree Village. With his heart ablaze, he walked toward the hold of the ship. It definitely had to have things like a compass to record the route to Carefree Village. Village Chief had once given him a mirror and said it was the map to Carefree Village, but he'd sealed it for the time being. Only when Qin Mu had the ability to break the seal could he see the route. That mirror had been found in the huge ship that was unmatched in the world. It was the ship heading to Carefree Village, but it had been destroyed, whereas this ship was still mostly complete. In that case, there had to be something similar, a map that was not sealed. Qin Mu pushed open a door and walked into the ship's bridge. At the bow, the huge eye gradually rose up, and another eye became bright as well, revealing two vertical pupils. A huge snake head appeared in the darkness and spat out its forked tongue silently as it stared at youth who was at the bridge. Qin Mu seemed to feel something and turned back to have a look, but he didn't see the two eyes hidden in the darkness. There's something looking at me. Qin Mu's heart leaped. Even though he didn't see the two eyes hidden in the darkness, he could feel their gaze. He turned around, away from the bridge, and closed his eyes while slowly walking outside. His footsteps weren't slow nor fast, and even though he had closed his eyes, he had still walked a circle, a perfect circle. After he did so, Qin Mu stopped. The reason he walked in a circle was to calculate the precise location of the gaze. This involved using algebra skills to calculate space. To other people, he would only be pacing around while thinking of some problem. No one would expect that he was actually calculating the location of the watcher. His mind was greatly shaken. In the few steps, he had determined the source of the gaze and some extra information. What was watching him was a pair of eyes, the distance between which were 900 yards. What a humongous entity! Could it be the Udu life form that was scared off by my one phrase of Udu language when I boarded the ship? Qin Mu composed himself, his expression remaining normal. He didn't reveal any hint of panic as he turned to walk toward the bridge. He wanted to scout out the bridge first. If something happened, he would leave immediately and not stay around. The bridge was the control room of a ship, the place where its direction, route, command battles, and evade attacks could be determined. This was the central administration of the treasured ship. As long as Qin Mu entered the bridge and found the route map, he would be able to control this ship according to the map. His heart was ablaze, for this ship carried his dreams of returning to Carefree Village. Just as he walked into the bridge, a door suddenly opened and a great shaman barged after him carelessly. When the two of them came face to face, they were both stunned. The great shaman was an expert that had been through many battles, so he reacted instantly and opened the mouth of the bottle gourd behind him. Countless souls instantly flew out, pouncing at Qin Mu. At the same time, the great shaman shone with golden light as he executed Grand Shaman Ruder scriptures of Roland's golden palace. His body swelled up and transformed into a one-eyed four-armed giant. His eyes combined into one and still grew larger. Because of that, the mouth was squished and pushed to the bottom of the left cheek while the nose moved to the lowest part of the right cheek. He held a Vajra truncheon in his hand, and the sections of the Vajra pillars spun. They looked like full long and slender pagoda that came smashing as Qin Mu. Grand Shaman's disciple? Qin Mu could see that what he executed belonged to Roland's golden palace from a single glance. The cultivation of this person was extremely dense, and the wandering soul spewing out from the bottle gourd on his back was his method of attacking. Great shamans refined the souls of other people into wandering souls, and each one had great power. When a wandering soul entered the opponent's body to bite on their soul, even divine arts practitioners of Six Directions realm would find it hard to defend themselves. If dozens of wandering souls came attacking together and invaded the body, there was no way for divine arts practitioners of Six Directions to resist. However, the wandering soul's bottle gourd was still the best on the battlefield. Countless wandering souls could slip here and there, invading human bodies and eating away their souls. Only corpses would be left after they were done. This kind of attack was said to be successful in every way and had an astonishing power. In front of Qingmen Pass, the most terrifying thing wasn't the knife pellets of barbarian Di Empire, but the great shamans of Roland's Golden Palace. Their attacks were simply strange and hard to guard against. Countless wandering souls from the bottle gourd flew over with miserable shrieks. Behind Qin Mu, Gate of Heaven influence opened up, and a cold wind blew out, sweeping away all the wandering souls with a swoosh. As long as it were the souls of the dead, it was hard for them to escape the control of Yudu. Even if Roland's Golden Palace had secret arts to make the souls stay behind, using the souls of others to cultivate, and their attainments on this path were at a point that other sacred grounds couldn't reach, Gate of Heavenly influence was their natural bane. Gate of Heaven influence swallowed all the wandering souls and shut itself. The miserable shrieks on the bridge instantly vanished. The great shaman was astonished, and the bottle gourd behind him fell to the floor with a thud and shattered into pieces. His 4 arms moved up and down as the Vajra truncheon on his hand transformed into 4 Vajra pagodas. With his immense strength, he smashed them against his opponent. Qin Mu didn't receive it head-on but moved back to dodge. The carefree sword on his back flew out from its sheath, and the great shaman sneered. A beam of light shone from the Vajra pagoda and hit carefree sword, sucking this treasured sword inside. The great shaman's 4 golden truncheons might have looked like truncheons, but his spirit weapon was actually 4 pagodas that were refined to change their sizes at will. Once they were shrunken to the smallest possible size, they looked like truncheons which could be held in one's hands. However, when in battle, the great shaman could use the terrifying power of the pagodas to overwhelm his enemies, using invincible strength to smash the opponent into a pile of mush. The pagodas were also unusual treasures that could take away the opponent's spirit weapons. If the opponent was not careful, their spirit weapons would be sucked into the pagodas. If this happened, the opponent could only die. The great shaman had just taken away Qin Mu's carefree sword with his pagoda when he saw treasured swords flying out from behind the other and stabbing into the pagoda. He was stunned and didn't react before the sword lights came flooding over like a sea, drowning him out. In an instant, the surroundings of the pagoda became filled with swords. The arm of the great shaman gave in first. Even with his immense strength of a cyclops, he still couldn't carry such a heavy thing. A crisp crack came from his arm as his bone snapped. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Several thousand treasured swords stabbed neatly around the pagoda to form an unimaginably huge sword pellet that had a radius of several yards. The great shaman had already disappeared by then. Qin Mu walked toward the helm of the bridge, leaving behind the great shaman which had been stabbed to death under the gigantic sword pellet. Beneath it, there was a leg sticking out. Qin Mu came to the front of the rudder. In this treasured ship, it was structurally different from those of Eternal Peace Empire's flying ships. The latter had one rudder which was used for changing the direction, rising, and descending, but the rudder of this treasured ship had other strange contraptions. There was also a silver helmet with red tassels. Frowning, Qin Mu examined the contraptions in detail, but he still couldn't understand their usage. He hesitated for a moment before picked up the silver helmet and placing it on his head. Suddenly, his vision lit up and the vast space in front of his eyes expanded and spread out. In a split second, the heaven and earth transformed, revealing the geographical features of great ruins, as well as eternal peace, the prairie, and the world of ice and snow in the north. Qin Mu was stunned. The person who forged this ship truly had the hands of God. They stored the geographical features in the helmet, so it could be used to control the course of the treasure ship. He stretched out a finger and gently made a dot on the geographical map in front of him. In an instant, the treasured ship trembled. It seemed to want to fly out from the beehive seals and toward the direction he had pointed. However, the ship was firmly stuck in the seal between the 2 worlds and couldn't fly up. So that's how you control the movement of the treasured ship. Qin Mu was delighted and blinked a few times. Suddenly, the scenery in front of him changed and an unfamiliar world appeared. It was the geographical map of another world. It had dark voids while the land was hidden in the depths, looking mysterious. What is this place? This isn't eternal peace, nor is it the prairie. Qin Mu examined it again to be sure that he had really never seen this strange place before. He blinked a few times, and the scenery changed again, presenting a magnificent and wonderful world that was neither great ruins nor eternal peace. He blinked his eyes again, and the scenery changed once more. This time, it was a water world with underwater mountains everywhere. Qin Mu tried over 10 times, and there were over a dozen or so geographical maps that he saw. However, it was different from what he had imagined. These maps didn't specify what world they portrayed and had no indicated routes. It left him clueless regarding which world had Carefree Village, and how to find it even if he went to the right world. There definitely has to be a compass with the record of the route to Carefree Village, so as long as I find it, I will be able to fly this ship back to Carefree Village. Qin Mu looked around, and his gaze landed on the place where the compass should be placed. There, he should have seen a mirror similar to the one village chief had given him, but that place was empty. The compass mirror was shattered? Luckily I still have the compass mirror Grandpa village chief gave me, however, I wonder if I can solve the seal on it. He stretched his hand into the Daotai sack to look for the compass mirror when he saw the shattered pieces on the floor. The mirror had been deliberately smashed by someone so that other people couldn't know the location of Carefree Village. Could the man in white have been the one that destroyed the mirror? Qin Mu was slightly stunned and pulled his hand out of the Daotai sack. There were many gods that were chasing after the man in white. They had defeated him, and Carefree's sword had been shattered so he would have no more strength to fight against the gods. Yet he had still stayed to cover the escape of his passengers. While doing that, he must have destroyed the compass mirror with the route to Carefree Village before he died, not wanting people to find it. In that case, this ship is a trap. A chill passed down Qin Mu's back of the head, and his hair stood up on end. He pretended to search and started inching toward the door of the bridge. The people who escaped into Yudu might still be alive. The aim of this trap is to capture them and find the route to Carefree Village. I have the mirror Grandpa village chief gave me, so if they get hold of it, they will be able to find Carefree Village. He passed by his sword pellet and it loosened up. The sword hilt started to fly outward equals and break down, but the feeling of being watched swept over him again. The two eyes that were 900 yards away from each other had landed on his body again, applying terrifying pressure on him. It was evident that the owner of the gaze was suspicious. Qin Mu pretended to be startled and turned his head back as if he had just felt something. At that moment, the invasive gaze suddenly faded away. Which senior is hidden in the darkness? Qin Mu asked loudly. Much thanks to Senior for your guidance, allowing Junior to enter this treasured ship. Could Senior please show himself? He waited for a moment, but no one replied. Qin Mu revealed a look of disappointment and continued to collect his treasured swords one by one while sighing. Since Senior isn't willing to show himself, this Junior can only engrave this event in his heart. He walked toward the door of the bridge, his heartbeat slightly faster than before. He used his vital qi to suppress his heartbeat, making it come back to normal. Just as he was about to leave the bridge, the door suddenly opened. Pan Gongso walked in and blocked the door with a smile. Cult Master Qin, you have two choices, you can either take off the helmet or lose your head. Qin Mu almost blurted out vulgarities, wishing for more than anything to stab the guy's chest with thousands of swords. This video will end here.